For our last task in this notebook, we're going to explore how to use generative AI within Colab. Colab is a Google product. Google has Gemini as its Gen AI tool. And so Gemini is integrated very intricately into Colab in order to assist with coding. So let's see how to do that. There are a couple of different ways to access the Gemini tool from within Colab, and they're changing their interface pretty regularly, so hopefully by the time you see this, it won't have changed too much. So let's say we have a task. We want to take our new feature, which is the acceptance percentage for each college. We want to separate it into high, medium, and low bins, and then study its relationship to graduation rate. So we're going to explore how to use Gen AI to write this code to do that. So the first thing we're going to do is show how to do it through commenting. So we want to make a histogram of accept percentage. So what we're going to do is create a new code block, and we will just write a comment. Comments in Python start with hash, and we can say, make a histogram of accept percent. Now you'll see what happens is when I hit return, it will automatically create some ghost code, right, in gray here, that I can either choose to accept or not. If I hit tab, it writes that code into this particular cell, and then I can execute that cell to get a histogram. And now I can see the accept percentage of colleges in histogram format. I can see it goes from roughly from 0.1 all the way up to 100%, 10% up to 100%. Now, it's very easy to use Gen AI in this way. As you're typing along, the generative AI function in Gemini is suggesting code for you and trying to anticipate what you're doing. You can write comments like we just did, and it will anticipate what you want to write. This is great and really helpful, and Gen AI is trying to be helpful, but there are some students who like to shut that off. And because if you're really trying to code, it's a little bit distracting for you if the AI underneath the curtain or behind the curtain is always suggesting for you to type. You're not actually thinking about what to type. So I do have a number of students who like to turn off that functionality, and you can do that in the settings in Gemini up in the corner if you'd like to do that. I actually encourage you to do that while you're learning to code. That way you can try out code on your own and see if it works, and then come back to the AI in order to help you to assess whether it's correct. Another way to do it is to use the generate function. You'll see that when I hit plus code and create a new cell block, we get a cell that says start coding or generate with AI. I can click on that word generate, and it adds forget about my previous code here. Let's clear Gemini window. You'll see that you get a new Gemini window here with a question that says, what can I help you build? And so you can ask it a question just like you do of any other Gen AI tool. So what I want to do is I want to create 3 different levels of accept percentage, low, medium, and high. Let's say, just looking at this histogram, those that are maybe below 40% I want to consider low, and those that are above 90% I want to consider high. And so I want to separate that feature in that way. So let's go back, let's generate, and let me write that down. Please, I have to say please, Gen AI, create a categorical feature from accept percent with low, medium, and high with cut points at 0.4 and 0.9. Let's see what it does. It should generate that code for us and then ask us if we want to execute it. So it's created that. Let's take a look at it. It's created the cut points I asked it to, labels of low, medium, and high. It's going to create a new category called accept percentage category with low, medium, and high. So let's accept and run that. And what it's going to do is it's going to create that feature called accept percentage category with low, medium, and high. And the medium group, as I defined it, is much bigger than everything else, but I've got the lows less than 0.4 and the highs greater than 79. Sorry, greater than 90%. Great. Now the third task I want to do is to compare those different levels. Who has low acceptance percentage who has high acceptance percentage and see if the graduation rates change that way. And I want to use Gemini to do that. You can also access Gemini through this link up here on the top right. It's going to give you the same window. Or just through this little Gemini icon on the bottom, it's going to give you that same window. So let me write, compare the graduation rates for the different levels of accept percentage. Now I didn't tell it how to compare. It might compare it numerically, it might compare it visually. Let's see what happens. Okay, I can regenerate the box plot to visualize and compare the graduation rates. That's not helpful. AI is just saying, I can do this, but I actually want it to do it. So that seems like a bug, but I'll humor them. Okay, please plot the box plot. I don't know why I say please all the time, but I do for some reason. I'll ask it to make those box plots. Here it gives me the code. I'll accept and run. And then here, what we learn is that, as you might expect, those colleges with low acceptance percentages, those more selective schools, have a higher graduation rate. If you don't know how to read a box plot, this line here is the median. So for those schools that have a low acceptance percentage, they graduate at over a 90% rate. Those with a high acceptance percentage, or the least selective colleges, have a much lower graduation rate of 59%. So this kind of passes the smell test. If I were to say what I expected the result would be before I plotted this, that's what I would have seen. So obviously GenAI is really powerful and really helpful in order to learn how to code. So I really wanted to give you some cautions or suggestions in how to use GenAI. One is that don't trust the output blindly. Make sure you take a look at it and make sure it makes sense. Does it follow your intuition? We've all heard about hallucinations. GenAI can make stuff up out of thin air. This is true with code also. It might just create code that doesn't work. You could end up being in a rabbit hole where the code doesn't work. You ask GenAI to fix it. It fixes it in a way that doesn't make sense or isn't answering the right question. So just be really careful. Don't just treat it as a black box that's going to answer the questions. One way to do that really effectively is to use GenAI in steps, right? So create your code, turn your problem into smaller chunks and execute those, right? So instead of just saying, I want to understand this relationship between these two features, we first created the categorical variable, we made sure that worked, then we used that categorical variable to understand a relationship. We can follow on with other questions and go step by step. I find that's the best way to use GenAI and the best way to see if it's going off the rails. Try and understand why it does what it does. It's writing code for you. Take a look at that code and see if you understand or maybe can figure out what that means. Maybe I don't know why this order was in this command. I can ask GenAI. Let me toggle that in and I'll say, why did you use order in the box plot command? And it's going to tell me. Hopefully, it's going to tell me that it's going to talk through how order allows the function to understand that I want the results in the order low, medium, and high, because if it reported the results in that plot as medium, high, low, or not in the same order, it's not as easy to interpret or to understand. So use GenAI to ask questions of the code to help you learn about coding so that you can do some more of it yourself, to work that muscle. And then finally, where's my advice here? Personalize your code. Make sure it has labels that make sense to you. Don't just tell it to create a feature. Give it a name. Give it a name that makes sense to you. Create your own labels for the plots that make sense to you. You're going to be presenting this work potentially, and you want to make sure that the labels and the title, the names of the variables all make sense. So personalize the code a little bit and make sure it works for you. At the bottom of this notebook, I've put some extra questions here, some things that you can ask of the dataset in order to practice if you want to. This is not an assignment. This is just if you want to explore writing code yourself or using AI to answer questions. These are just some questions that you could ask of the data see if you can come up with some, maybe think about it beforehand and see if you can think about what you might expect to see, and then write the code or use GenAI and see if your answer comes out as you expected based on what you know about colleges. And that's the end of our first async video assignment for this class. There is one more part of the async that I'd like you to do. It's listed as number 3 on the assignment sheet. It shouldn't take a long time. What I'd like you to do is explore GenAI in a no-code fashion. See, GenAI is now able to take in data sets and claim to do analysis without writing any code or having any intervention. And I'd like to explore during this class how good that is, because I think there's going to be value in you learning to write code, but I want you to see what GenAI can do in the space of not writing code. And what I've asked you to do in that number 3 is to take that spreadsheet, that CSV file, that college CSV file, and I'd like you to import it into your favorite GenAI tool. It could be GPT, it could be Claude, it could be Gemini, and then just ask a simple question like, what are some characteristics of this data set? Or tell me something interesting about this data set. See what GenAI comes up with, and then I'd like you to tell me what you found in the async assessment that you should be filling out when you're done with this assignment. So go ahead and do that, finish up the assignment, finish up the assessment, and we're all done. I think this should have taken you about an hour or less. If it took a lot more, let me know, because I can make sure to adjust as the semester goes along. See you in class.